Researcher Paul Watson is causing quite a stir this week with his findings about a core internet technology. Watson discovered that it is possible to exploit a flaw in the technology and effectively force entire portions of the internet offline far more easily than previously thought. Now today he'll outline how that can be done at a security conference in British Columbia. Paul Watson joins us now from CBC Studios in Vancouver. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Melissa.
Before we get into what could happen because of this flaw, for those of us who are more technically challenged, explain exactly what it is that you discovered.
Sure. If you imagine the internet as kind of the interstate highway system, with all the roads being the connections between the various computers. The routers on the internet could be considered the bridges. The routers are what actually pass the traffic from one place to another. And this vulnerability we found basically focuses on those routers. It would be very similar to taking out all the bridges on the highway system. So people could pull out of their driveway, but they wouldn't be able to get very far.
Now on Tuesday, you were quoted as giving a rather dire prediction of how quickly the flaw would be exploited. The governments of the U.S. and Great Britain issued warnings, in fact, and there was talk of the whole internet going down. But now you're saying the reports were overhyped. So is it or is it not a real threat?
Well, I believe the reports were accurate, that there was that potential, but they were a little overhyped in the sense that the threat had already been alleviated because of the work of, literally tens of thousands of, excellent internet engineers around the globe have put in an incredible effort over the past week to remediate the problems and literally upgrade the entire internet software.
But as far as actually talking about this at a conference, you also have been quoted as saying that 5 minutes after the conference is over, you suspect hackers will begin trying to do this. So why reveal this information so publicly? Is this kind of almost an issue like national security where the public really doesn't need to know?
Well, it's very much one of those issues where whether I reveal it or not, or someone else reveals it, eventually people are going to find out. The good thing about revealing this information is, I've had the research for about a year now, and I've been working very closely with a lot of agencies around the world, including NICE over in the UK, to get the information out to the people that needed to know it, that could actually implement the fixes. And now that most of the fixes are in place, we feel comfortable, going forth with this research because the threat's really been mitigated for the most part.
Now this begs the question, though, how secure are other such core technologies?
Well, that's a really good question. There's several projects out there. I'm involved in one called the Open Source Vulnerability Database that's actually in the process of cataloging and inventorying all these vulnerabilities and issues that are out there into a free resource available to anybody to kind of collect all this information and research in this one place. And that's going to help us get a lot better handle on it and track these issues ahead of time. Now,
on your website, terrorist.net, which is an interesting name, you talk about computer security and black hat hackers and white hat hackers, which I believe you're a white hat hacker. Define what we're talking about here.
Well, most people remember the old cowboy movies, and you could always tell the good guy because he wore the white hat and the bad guy because he wore the black hat. The hacker community is pretty much divided up into the same categories. There's guys that, with the same information I had, would rather make a name for themselves by trying to cripple the internet, and others like myself that would much rather try to prevent that and reap the rewards that come from doing something good. There's various conventions. Black Hat's one up in Vegas where I initially started my research that meets and greets with the white hats and the black hats occasionally get together once a year and talk and exchange information.
Now, we're talking hackers, but there are terrorists too. They say the next fronts of terrorism, in the future will be fought over the internet. Does this flaw make us more vulnerable to that kind of terrorism?
Well, actually, I think this flaw is probably one of those things that would have been a concern, that had it not been discovered and fixed, it would have been an avenue of attack for any sponsored organization with the right resources. Because of the efforts of the government, they've really kept a tight veil of secrecy over this in the past few weeks while this was being fixed. And the ability of the government to be able to do that with, so many tens of thousands of people involved in trying to fix it, really says a lot for the work that's being done.
Now, computer users are getting pretty used to hearing viruses, worms, that type of thing. What is going to be the next threat for just the average person with your PC?
Well, there's always going to be viruses and worms coming out. They're like mosquitoes. They come up and they bite you and you brush them off. You never know where the next big threat's going to come from, and that's why there's so many researchers at the CanSec West conference that I'm actually presenting my paper at. There's dozens of other researchers presenting some just outstanding work, and they're addressing these very same issues.
Now, speaking of average user, though, we have been kept in the dark as far as what the TCP threat was for months. And was that, again, to protect us, or why should we know about it?
Well, the reason we wouldn't tell most people is the fact you could tell 100,000 people and most people, would be glad to know it. But if there was one person with less than noble intentions, it would give him the ammunition he needed to load up a dangerous weapon.
All right, Paul, final question. What else don't we know and maybe don't want to know?
I'm sorry?
As far as these kinds of problems, what else don't we know that maybe we may not even want to know? But is there something else around the corner that we should be, other threats?
There's, several threats and issues out there. Most of them are pretty obscure, and a lot of people are doing research on it that, I'll let them present their findings as they come forward. I don't want to steal anyone else's thunder.
All right. Good idea. Paul Watson, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Melissa. I really appreciated talking with you.
And we'll be right back.